Most people spend their entire lives believing one lie, that their circumstances decide who they become. Robert believed that lie for 11 years, until one question changed everything. Robert cleaned floors at a public middle school, 6 a.m. every morning before a single student walked through the doors. He'd worked there for 11 years. Same mop, same hallways, same fluorescent lights humming overhead, same squeak in the same tile near the gymnasium he'd never bothered reporting. Kids walked past him like he was part of the wall. Teachers nodded politely but rarely remembered his name. Once, a substitute teacher asked him for directions to the front office in the building he'd worked in longer than she'd been teaching. Robert had grown up believing his circumstances defined him. Grew up poor, dropped out young to help support his mother, never finished the trade certification he once wanted, back when he still let himself want things out loud. He told himself this was simply his lot in life. Some people were built for more. He wasn't one of them. He'd repeated that sentence to himself so many times it had started to feel less like a belief and more like a fact. Every night, he went home to a small apartment above a laundromat, ate dinner alone, and watched the same shows until he fell asleep too tired to think about tomorrow. He wasn't lazy. He worked hard every single day. But hard work without belief in something more just felt like standing still while time moved past him, year after year, hallway after hallway. His mother called every Sunday. She never pushed, but he could hear the quiet hope in her voice every time she asked how work was going, like she was still waiting for a different answer than the one he always gave her. One evening, Robert stayed late fixing a broken supply closet lock, a small job nobody had asked him to do. An older man was still in the building, a retired engineer named Walter, who volunteered running the school's evening robotics club. Walter watched Robert work for a few minutes in silence, genuinely impressed by how carefully he fixed something so small. "You do good work," Walter said. "Better than most people I've paid to do the same job." Robert shrugged. "It's just a lock." Walter studied him for a moment. "Who told you that this is all you'll ever be?" Robert blinked, caught off guard. "Nobody." "Then why do you keep repeating it?" Robert didn't have an answer for that. Nobody had ever asked him a question like it before. Walter reached into his bag and pulled out an old, worn notebook, setting it gently on the closet shelf between them. "Every life changes twice," he said. "The first time is when you decide who you are." He didn't finish the thought. He just let it sit there, between them, in the quiet of the supply closet. "What do you believe about yourself, Robert?" he asked instead. "Not what happened to you. What you actually believe you're capable of." Robert didn't have a good answer for that either. He'd never really been asked that question before. Walter started staying a few extra minutes most evenings, and their conversations kept going, usually while Robert finished locking up the science wing. "Interesting," Walter said one evening, watching Robert scrub a scuff mark off the gymnasium floor. "What?" Robert asked. "You've spent 11 years cleaning floors." Walter paused. "But the dirtiest thing in this building isn't the hallway. It's the story you keep telling yourself." He didn't explain further. He just let Robert sit with it. Walter gave Robert one small practice instead. Every morning before starting his shift, spend 10 minutes writing down exactly who he intended to become. Not someday, but that specific day. Then act, all day, as if that person was already true. Robert started arriving at 5:40 the next morning, before the building's main lights ever came on. The hallway sat dark and empty around him. He'd switch on a single light near the supply closet, sit alone on an overturned bucket, and open the notebook Walter had given him. He felt foolish doing it at first, half expecting someone to walk in and catch him. But he kept doing it anyway, 10 minutes, every morning, before the mop ever touched the floor. Within a few weeks, something shifted. He started noticing broken things around the school he could actually fix well beyond his job description. A flickering exit sign, a jammed locker row, and started doing it with real pride instead of quiet resentment. He asked Walter to teach him basic electrical work on weekends. Walter agreed immediately, clearly pleased to be asked. Teachers started noticing Robert differently, not because his job changed, because he'd stopped moving through it like a man waiting for his real life to begin somewhere else, someday. The school principal even stopped him in the hallway once just to say the building had never looked better cared for. Not everyone around Robert reacted well to the change. A co-worker accused him of trying to show off, annoyed that Robert's extra effort made the rest of the janitorial staff look less motivated by comparison, muttering about it in the break room where Robert could hear. His own mother, proud but worried, asked him gently why he was suddenly taking night classes at his age, worried he was setting himself up for disappointment again, the way he had once before with the certification he never finished. Robert started doubting himself some weeks, wondering if this was just another false start, the kind he'd talked himself out of more than once before. Usually right around the point things started to feel real. Walter's robotics club lost its funding that spring, and Walter himself grew sicker, missing more evenings than he attended, his usual chair by the science lab sitting empty, more often than not. Robert almost stopped the morning notebook practice entirely one particularly hard week, telling himself it hadn't actually changed anything real about his life yet, just his mood, just his outlook, nothing that paid the bills. But he remembered what Walter had told him early on. The practice was never about proving something to other people. It was about who he was choosing to become, whether or not anyone else noticed yet, whether or not it ever showed up on a paycheck. He kept writing every morning, even the mornings he didn't believe it would matter, even the morning he heard Walter had been moved to hospice care. Walter passed away that following winter, quietly, at home, before Robert had the chance to properly thank him for anything he'd taught him. At the funeral, Robert learned something he never knew. Walter had spent decades mentoring dozens of people exactly like him, quietly, never publicly, never asking for anything in return, never even mentioning it to Robert once in all their conversations. Walter's daughter handed Robert a small envelope afterward. Along with a few others, she was distributing to faces she clearly recognized from her father's stories over the years. Inside was a short note in Walter's handwriting, along with a formal electrical apprenticeship application already filled out on Robert's behalf, needing only his signature. The note read simply, "Every life changes twice, Robert. You already handled the first time back in that supply closet. This is the second time, when you finally act on it." Robert stood in the church parking lot, reading it twice, then a third time, before he could bring himself to fold it back into the envelope. He signed it that same week. 2 years later, Robert became a licensed electrician, running his own small contracting business by his 40th birthday, with 2 employees of his own and a waiting list of clients. He still keeps a notebook. He still writes 10 minutes every morning before starting work, the same practice Walter had taught him in a supply closet that neither of them thought would matter much at the time. He hired one of his first employees straight out of the same maintenance department he used to work in, a young man who reminded Robert, more than a little, of himself 11 years earlier. Here's what Robert's story proves. Your circumstances are real. Nobody is denying that. But your mind decides what those circumstances mean about your future, and that decision belongs entirely to you. So here's your challenge, the same one Walter gave Robert without either of them calling it that at the time. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before the day gets its hands on you, take 10 minutes and write down exactly who you're choosing to become that day. Not someday, that day. Then act like it's already true in every small task in front of you. Do that for 90 days and tell me your circumstances haven't started to look different. One day, someone will ask you when your life changed. Most people will point to a promotion, a marriage, a business. Robert would point to something much smaller, a notebook, and 10 quiet minutes before anyone else was awake. Tomorrow morning, Someone else will wake up with your same bills, your same problems, your same job. The only question is, will they wake up with your new mind?